It's the Wednesday Wisdom Show, and you need to know, is karma real? Before we get into this episode of the Wednesday Wisdom Show, I want to explain what this show is about. Everything that I speak about comes from the tradition of authentic Kabbalah. I say authentic because this strain has been passed down from teacher to student over thousands of years. But this show is not a lesson on Kabbalah. It's about Kabbalah. It's Kabbalah's take on very deep questions that people search the internet for. So if you want to learn about it because something that you've heard here is interesting to you, or you want to know more about it, or you want to actualize it for yourself, then there are classes. It's a study. It's not really something that is taken in just within reason. That's what's beautiful about it. It's a real methodology that uses reason but also enables a person to work both within and above reason. And that's why it is an all-inclusive science, because it deals with everything, not just in the line below what we would think of as spirituality, but above it as well. It allows for a comparison. It's a true science of the upper forces. And that means even though I'm talking about what Kabbalah says about something, the arguments of our ego and reason are usually opposed to this. Now, not everybody hears it in a negative way, and everybody, of course, has accumulated a lot of ideas from things that they've read, from videos that they've seen, and some people specifically from books that they've read about Kabbalah. But you can't really understand books, the real books of Kabbalah, only with your mind. It takes training. You have to have oral teaching. You have to have a Kabbalist who is in attainment to guide you from the normal take that we have on these things within our reason, dictated by our ego, to the point where we begin to see and understand the definitions and, in fact, the reality that exists above that and especially between those two states. So this is not a class. It may be interesting, and I hope that it is. But if you want to learn, there will be links appearing on the screen, and there's also links below, and an opportunity for you to join a class. It's free. So there's nothing really stopping you except your own readiness. So does karma exist? Yes, it most certainly does. And I'm not going to try to explain it from the point of view that the Buddhists have, or the yogic point of view, or the Vedantic, because I can't. And also, this explanation is not in competition with any of those points of view. What I would like to explain is the basic natural law that gets called karma. This phenomenon is known in Kabbalah by the terms prayer and commandments. And they've got to do with two sides of a relationship in what we think of as the karmic interaction. One is on behalf of the force of nature, the principal law out of which everything evolves and evolves to fulfillment. And the other one is the response of the created being, or that part of it that is not yet aware of its connection to the whole. So prayer is the part that's connected to our part of the relationship, and commandments, or Torah and mitzvot, are the actions of the complete force that designed the whole system and is evolving it to a higher state of perfection. So the biggest misunderstanding about how this whole system works is that we tend to think of it as a justice system, a criminal justice system, in which actions that we do towards other people even thoughts that we have, are balanced out by a heavenly court in which nobody gets away with anything, and everything, always comes back no matter what you do. Now, it's not a criminal justice system, and it's not based on the good and bad that we think about. It's based on the good and bad according to the principle by which everything was created. There's no punishment involved in this system. The concept of karma, the popular one, says if you make somebody suffer, then you will suffer. But the system itself is much greater and much more loving than that very small conception of good and bad. Suffering is not a punishment. Suffering is a correction in the sense that it aims us better at the target. Like when you shoot a missile, it never goes straight and directly to that target without any deviation, without any mistake. It's constantly in mistake. It's constantly off the correct course. And the guidance system will tap it this way or that way, this way or that way, and it's constantly out of alignment with its correct course until it reaches its target. The same with us. Remember, this is in a matrix of love, and we're built according to our desires and the responses that we have in the sensations around our desires. So it always speaks to us that way because that's the type of creature that we are. The sensations that we call suffering or inner pain, that's the currency of the relationship that we have with the upper force. It's not the external things that happen to us. It's that set of responses, of desires and frustrations about the desires, a sense of being lifted up and being in a positive space or feeling shame. That's the matter out of which our development evolves. It's not to say that there aren't external sufferings, or at least there appear to be. But given the context of the intended goal, those are truly of no matter in the overall system. And in fact, if we respond correctly to the system, we don't experience those things externally at all. We experience all of the corrections internally. Okay, so let's talk about Torah and mitzvot, commandments on the side of the upper force, on the side of the matrix, and prayer on the side of the created being. Now, prayer is completely misunderstood. Prayer is not something that we say. We don't get down on our knees and feign things that we wish were so just according to words. Prayer in Kabbalah is defined as a need, a deficiency, but a deficiency only in regards to what the upper force requires of us. Now, for most of our lives, until we come to a conscious connection with our correction or with the engagement with the matrix and the desire of the matrix, so to speak, and where it wants to lead us, we're totally unconscious of this. So we make all kinds of actions and we're getting all kinds of responses constantly because the needs that evolve in us are the thing that triggers the action. If we don't evolve our needs, then the action is repetitive, it's the same, and we don't grow, we don't change. The light is always in a standby mode and it's waiting for a correct type of a desire, a deficiency within us towards the thing that it wants to appear. Now, if a desire that has something to do with where it wants to take us appears, then it immediately responds by filling us with an awareness and lifting us up to a certain next level. And if unconsciously we have something that appears in us that's a desire that takes us away from the place that it wants to evolve us to consciously. Like we start focusing on our own best interests against the interests of the people that surround us, then it's going to respond with sensations. Out of that currency of sensation, shame, joy, it'll be one of those things that it delivers to us in order to create a kind of a response, an emotional response in us that makes us search for the cause of the suffering. But we can't feign prayer. It's not something that you can manufacture. It's what appears in us according to our evolutionary experience, and it's always aiming at getting us to have a greater and greater sensation of what life is actually all about, where it's intending us to go. There's no other way to really speak about it. You can read a prayer book, you can do all those things, but that's not necessarily going to trigger the upper force to respond to us in a way that is going to fulfill and enlighten us. I know that many people will have a question about the prayer books, the Siddur, the Order of Jewish Prayer, or the Christian prayer books. Their origin is actually in Kabbalah. And the way in which those prayers are constructed, well, first of all, they're constructed by the Great Assembly, the Sanhedrin, which was an assembly of Kabbalistic sages. And every one of the prayers is actually describing a specific state that a person should be reaching. It's describing a complete ascent to the end of this correcting process. And it takes one through a process through the entire series of prayers, say in a morning prayer or in an afternoon prayer, or etc. And it's complex, and it has to do with actually modeling the way that the spiritual worlds are modeled. But our understanding of this is gone. I mean, we don't have that, except for Kabbalists who learn what these states are today and who study how to reach them. These things only seem like beautiful words. But they're based in reality, and they're based on real structures, the real science of nature. But we're completely detached from it because we don't know this method. We don't understand that the things spoken about there are not just high, lofty phrases. They are actually the description of deficiencies and desires that should appear in us over and over again, that lead us to the place where the upper system wants to guide us. Now, from the side of the upper force, it reacts to us through a system called commandments. These 613, there's actually 620, commandments are all corrections, meaning given the desire that we have at the moment, if we have successfully navigated from the last one, there exists only one next step that can be taken, and that's the place that it wants to take us. Meaning it wants to correct the current desire to a place where it will have the reason, the sensation, the action, the intention of the next state. And that would mean a correction to the one that we're at. So this 613, 620 really means once we've done all this that it is a complete correction. It's not really about the number, though it's possible to do all kinds of number and gematria analysis of this. It adds up to a, if you can say add, it adds up to a quality of completeness, because in spirituality there is no such thing as part of anything. It is whole. So it's trying to correct. There are corresponding commands to all of the human desires that can be there. And it corrects each one of these desires from its self-focused state to its altruistically focused state. Now, in every one of these steps, there is a complete world and an entire play a whole movie with CGI and all that stuff that is there for us to feel within our emotional state everything that we need to. The fact is, though, that there's really nothing about this process that's self-focused or self-centered. It really is about correcting the world, because the whole world exists within us, and only for the purpose of raising us to be similar to the force. Not to be God, but to be similar in quality to that. And let me repeat again that this upper force is always there on standby, always waiting for our responses. And as soon as a desire appears in us that goes either towards the goal intended or away from the intended goal, there is an immediate reaction. So everything is very balanced and ripples out in a balanced way throughout the entire system, because our correction involves the entire system. And it's like a crystalline form. And we see all of that, and we see it as though it were a system of justice. But what you're seeing is a beautifully balanced, loving attitude towards us that evokes in us a perception that's like that. But nobody's being punished, and all sensations of shame or suffering are just the currency by which we begin to invest and feel and make real within us the guiding sensation behind all of life. So that accounts for all that instant karma stuff and the ideas that we have about justice and so on, karmic justice, which is really the way that it appears to us when we are unconscious of the system. But once a person starts to consciously engage with this, and they begin to see that, yes, they're in a certain state, and that this state, which once was a better state than the one they had before, is no longer good because there is another desired state that's appearing as a deficit in the person. That is a correct request. The difference between my current state and the one that would be even better than that, according to the principles by which everything was created and by which everything comes to fulfillment, the need to experience that next state, that's a real prayer. And that, again, is responded to immediately by the upper force, because it's just waiting for us to have this demand. That's a correct demand. So how do you learn about such a thing? How do you become aware of it? Well, part of it is just a natural evolution, and part of it needs to be learned as a methodology, because there is so much in our perception of reality that obscures this from us. We're caught up in all of the intricacies of what appears to be outside of us, the physical things, the material things. They're so beautiful, they're so engaging, but there comes a point in a person's life where they're no longer captivated by it, and they know that there is another purpose. It's not that it's suddenly going to appear inside of you. That's the unconscious part of your evolution. The conscious part involves recognizing, first of all, that there is such a principle functioning within you, and that your desire is for something very different than what it used to be. And now one has to learn how the system's made, how you do it. So comment, like, share, and press on that bell thingy so that you'll get notices for the next show.